All right, folks. Folks are slowly trickling in. We're going to get started in just a minute, making sure that we can admit everyone. All right, it is time to rock and roll. I'll keep admitting people as they join us. Aron, do you want to get started with some introductions?
Yep. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to have all of you here for this discussion, which I think is going to be really important. Obviously, lots of things going on. I will say that some of you may have seen my name and Googled and found that there's a Dr. Aron Hall who actually spells his name exactly like mine that works for the CDC. That may be why you logged in today, and if that's why, I'm really sorry to disappoint you because I'm not that guy. But he is an expert in viruses, but that doesn't translate just because we have the same name. And that leads me to the first point, and that is we are coming at this today, hopefully to give you some suggestions. We are looking to give folks, give you some, practical on the ground things that may be happening, some philosophical ideas, some various things like that. But we're excited to have Lisa and Bill on with us today, longtime friends of ours, and folks that are really, really good at what they do. And so we're excited about that. But, we are not the CDC. We are not the White House. We are not your governor. We are not your risk management team. We are not your insurance company. And so we have to we have to just make that disclaimer up front that anything we say today, you have to filter through all those various channels that you have going on. One couple of things I'll say, though, to just start from an encouraging point of view, if you will, all right? And that is, one, we firmly believe that people who've been doing inclusion are literally the best people in the universe at making adaptations. That's literally what we've been doing for decades and decades and decades to serve the children, families, and communities that we're involved with. And I don't think maybe it's just me being Pollyanna. I don't know, but I just don't think this is the one thing that's going to beat us and keep us from including kids. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's not. I'm not trying to make light of or minimize anything, but if in a world that is requiring adaptation at the highest level, we are literally the best equipped people that can be out there to do this work. And I firmly believe that, and I want you to be encouraged in that. Secondly, I just want to say that, our position as an organization is, regardless of what you're doing, we're here to support you. All right. If you're reopening, we're here for it. If you're not reopening and you're doing virtual stuff, we're here for it. If you're doing both, we're here for it. And we've already done one of these about some virtual offerings, which that video is still available on our website if you weren't able to plug into that one. But we are encouraged by how many people are opening up camps and have opened camps and begun to navigate those waters. And it was our firm belief that someone was going to have to go first. Someone was going to have to figure out exactly what is, exactly what is supposed to be happening and how it's going to look and so forth. And so we appreciate those of you that have already taken some steps in doing that. But we're here today just to provide, some suggestions, some thoughts, some answers to questions maybe, and hopefully we can continue making this a little more concrete as we move forward. So with that, Lisa, Bill, if y'all want to take over, maybe Lisa first, if you want to introduce yourself. Bill, introduce yourself, and then we'll rock and roll from there.
Thanks, Aron, and hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Drennan. I'm the founder of Merge Diversibilities Inclusion Consulting, and as Aron had mentioned, a longtime friend of NIP, and NIP is part of the reason why I'm here today. Just really inspired by the work they do, provide inclusive training and consultation to recreation, camp, sport, and other community organizations. Glad to be here today. Thank you, Aron and Amanda.
You're muted, Bill.
Somebody's going to get a bingo off of that one. My name is Bill Hinton. I'm the executive director of YMCA Camp Manitou-Lin. I've been in camping for over 20 years, and the inclusion, I've been involved with the National Inclusion Projects with a lot of different things, and I'm just excited to be here and share what we are doing, and hopefully it'll give you some good ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We also have Amanda Kloo on. She's kind of facilitating and stuff, but she can introduce herself too, of course.
Hi guys, it's Amanda from National Inclusion Project. I am the Director of Inclusion Standards and Accreditation. And just to let everyone know, I will continue to admit people as they join. If you have questions as the talk progresses, please do submit those questions or comments or responses to your chat function. And we will use those as well as questions that were emailed to us beforehand as the basis for our question and answer period. So please keep communicating and let us know what it is that we can focus in on and how it is that we can help. But just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us. Don't forget that all of these resources will be posted on our website on the NIP page, as well as our COVID-19 resource page, so that you can access all of this afterward as well. So our questions today are going to focus on two major points. First, we're going to have Bill, Lisa, and Aron address the overall best practices that they think that we should keep in mind when we are reopening camps to focus in on including kids with disabilities, even when we are physically distanced or socially distanced in our activities and what it is that we provide to those kids and those families. So we'll start with that question. And then our follow-up question will be, what are some practical strategies or tips that you can offer to camp leadership and camp staff as they start getting feet on the ground and rubber to the road kind of implementation? So to start off, Aron, do you want to lead us into those best practice concepts, and then we can have Bill and Lisa follow up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think what I'll start with is just kind of the bigger, broader things when it comes to communication, when it comes to, thinking about, this. We have always, from a best practice standpoint, always said, what is the highest point of need for a child or for a program, and plan for that. And that typically will, you'll be able to expand that through to other other participants and not miss a beat, and usually find that that's the best way to include everyone in the first place. And so that doesn't change with what we've talked about here. I think one thing I think we'll want to talk about is just, we're always concerned with communicating with families. I've heard quite a few questions about that. I think a best practice, I don't know if this would fall, would be just keep it simple and keep it honest. Be honest about the way you're going to be able to operate. Be honest about the guidelines that you have to follow. Be honest about those things. And just like in every situation that you have, families then have to make the decision about, if your program can support them or not, based on the guidelines you have to follow. But keep it simple, keep it honest. Communicate more than less is going to be a big deal. And then as far as, once children are there, I'm going to defer to Bill and Lisa here, because especially Bill, has, folks that are coming in and doing those kind of things. But so Bill, why don't you take over from here, and Lisa, you can follow up.
Thanks, Aron. really the cool thing is we're still doing inclusion, right? It doesn't change what we're doing. I see it as both looking at it in a micro group or in a macro. So the macro, the large group stuff, because of the CDC guidelines and ACA and your health departments, will have changed based on where you are in the country. So we, yes, you may not be doing large group games because of those guidelines. So you don't necessarily have to fix that inclusion, but that doesn't stop our cohorts, or we call them trail groups at Manitou-Lin. Those are mixed up kids, right? There are campers that have all sorts of different diverse abilities and mindsets and challenges and opportunities. And it hasn't stopped us. We've always just done it by age or grade level. And so we will continue to do that. I will say that we made the tough decision, and we are not running overnight camping at Manitou-Lin. Because of the guidelines, we are just not able to do the sleeping arrangements. And there were other factors that played into that, but that hasn't stopped us from doing our day camp programs. And Aron said it, I thought it's really important to be honest. That we, when our parents call us, we tell them exactly what we are doing. So if they have a mask aversion and they are riding our bus, one of our requirements is that they have to wear a mask. So when they're on the bus, because we can't social distance, and we have the protocols, so we're not stopping them from coming to our program. They just might need to drive out and do a drop off because they can't wear a mask for that long period of time. So just a small example, but it's not stopping us from still singing songs and doing all of the things that we are able to do, and to make any of those modifications that we would normally do in our inclusive program. I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Caught me. All right, so thanks, and I love that philosophy, Bill. What I wanted to share with you today, well, first I wanted to start with that question. I love that question, and and it says that what inclusive practices can we be implementing even in social distance or physically distancing settings? And what I've been saying recently in some of my discussions and trainings is that especially in this setting is when we need to really be grabbing onto inclusive strategies. And I echo what Aron had said about we do this well, right? Modifications, accommodations, we've been doing this well, and that's the philosophies that we follow in trying to include in our, all kiddos with diverse abilities into your camps and programs. And now an entire camp or an entire program is having to do that. So I just wanted to start with that this is the absolute perfect type of inclusive strategies and philosophies, principles need to be implemented. This is actually what I think is going to help a lot of programs this summer. So I'd love to share with you a little bit more. Clearly, I have, it probably ends up being about a dozen different strategies. I'm not sharing them all, but I just want to mention a few that I really think that if you're not already practicing these, that it would be a good time to do so. And then, of course, practicing them in thinking about how you keep to your guidelines, to your health and safety guidelines. So one, making sure that you are throughout your programming using a visual schedule together and using that every day, just keeping that kind of practice in place. It's going to help all of our kiddos, right? Using an expectation list. So creating that expectation list, always framed in the positive and, always reviewed every single day or additionally when necessary. So these are just strategies that are going to be very, very important this year more than ever. using a transition countdown. So those are just a few of the examples. And what I say, or I've been saying, that the philosophies or strategies that I'm suggesting, so these are more ideological in a way, or those are a little bit more concrete, but I'm not giving you, you'll have to take this information and apply it to how you're going to execute, what inclusion looks at your program. So those are just a few examples. I also want to share that it's very, very important this year more than ever that we're using all of these strategies for all of our campers, right? So reason being, it makes sense, and it's always, you want to be using these strategies for your entire camp because all kids can benefit from them, whether they're have a diagnosis identified as needing inclusion supports or not. All kids, particularly this year, we can go back to last year, and maybe you knew X amount of kids that really needed inclusion supports. Well, this year, from what I'm reading and understanding, and for those of you who have already started, perhaps you're already seeing this, our entire society, our kiddos have been through a rather traumatic experience, right? That that has happened since March, with the isolation, and then not having their total structure changed, all of that. So and you add in the fear and the things that are just going on in our culture, that social emotional wise, I think all of our kiddos are going to need a little extra TLC this summer. So it's even further reason why we want to be using these inclusion strategies, or just philosophies in general. A few more of my principles that I want to share, and I have many more, and I'm happy to talk to you more about them later, or if you want to touch base with me. But organizational commitment, think about that. Make sure that everybody within your organization is committed to inclusion and practicing these strategies, not just, an inclusion staff or this program over here. True authentic inclusion means that we are, as systematically as an organization, are all on board in practicing these strategies. So that would be number one, and that's from the top all the way down to, everybody involved. And this is one of my favorite principles as well. Let's get to success, right? So it's a mind shift in your mindset shift. So what we want to be thinking about as barriers or issues come our way, something, Bill, your example of the mask was perfect, right? So as they come your way, what do we do in this situation with this particular camper, or a new camper is coming in and there's particular issues that they may be dealing with? We want to try to be thinking about, when the information comes to us, having the let's get to yes, as opposed to, how's this not going to work? I'm going to list all the things why this isn't going to work, and try to make sure we're in that mindset of thinking, how can we make this work, right? And then you use the team around you, or use this group, or use NIP, or use all the wonderful resources you have around you to figure out how we're going to make this work for this camper, for this group, for your entire camp. So just that mindset shift of let's get to success. So get to yes. And then finally, working as a team, and Aron had touched upon this, but particularly great communication with your families. And I credit you for this too. You were joining the families, their team, right? Aron, that was something that I learned from you, that when we think about who is our best resources to help our campers or kiddos to be successful in the summer, more than likely their family is the best. You're joining their team, so you want to hear from them. How can we help? What's going on at home? What are, what have they experienced so far with using a mask, or how are they doing with the physical distancing so far? That type of thinking. Use your family, use your teammates, your fellow counselors and staff, but think like a team. We're not in this alone, little silos trying to figure this all out, and we're all working on something that's new. I've been asked some questions like, what are we going to do here? A lot of time I don't know. We haven't been through this yet, but I believe if you use all these inclusive principles and strategies, philosophies, you're more than likely to be able to solve any issue that's going to come your way, or any barrier. So hopefully that was helpful.
It's good. It's good. Lisa, let me follow up real quick before we move on to the next question. I think that, we've always operated with three core beliefs, right? Every child can make a friend, every child can participate, and every child can be successful. And we still believe that. And that's the beauty of a belief system, is that it's not dependent on circumstances. And that's where we are firmly still there. And yes, again, I want to talk about the fact that it's not going to be. We're not saying it's going to be easy, but I do love that start with yes. And I think that. I recently finished reading a book, and it was essentially the premise was, instead of trying to get people to become fans of what you do, get really good at being a fan of what they're doing and watch the community build. And I love that principle. And it's that this book was written a couple years ago, but I don't think it's ever been more appropriate than right now. And that is, there are so many people out there, Lisa, you talked about it. There's not a person coming in to your program, family, staff, child, that hasn't been affected in some way. And, having that mindset of, we're going to be for each other. We're going to be for the family. We're going to be for the community. We're going to be for our organization. We're going to be for ourselves. We're going to be and understand that it is going to take some navigation. It is going to take a little, maybe given a little more room for children to react, for staff to react, for families to react to certain things that they're hearing for the first time, for staff who've been with you for years coming in and having to navigate a different way that camp looks, for children and families who've been with you for years navigating a way it looks. We did some think tanks early on, and one of the things that really struck me was, camp has always been that place where kids could feel very safe. It was a refuge, a haven for them, for the summer, for the time that they were there. And now this place that's always been very safe is going to look very different. And in our minds, it's not going to be any less safe. However, perception is reality, and when it looks different, it comes across as different. And so I think we have to be aware of that, so we can make sure that we're for folks. And I love the start with yes thing. And one of the reasons I love that is because look around and how many things we're being told not to do. No, you can't do this. No, you can't go here. No, you can't wear this. No, you can't be this. No, you can't do this. And if you're the organization in your community right now that says, you know what, I don't know how we're going to do it, but let's figure it out. I don't know how we're going to make this work, but let's figure it out. And sometimes it's not going to be possible to figure out. Again, I'm not trying to come across as some kind of Pollyanna, optimist that has no basis in reality. I get it. But, if we start there, and, I was talking to an organization recently, and we were talking about going to their risk management team and proposing some things that they thought were reasonable to do. And I said, I think the first thing you have to say to a team like that is you have to say, before I get started, can we agree that we're going to start with we're going to start with that we can make this work, and now we're going to figure out how we make this work, not I'm going to say something and you're immediately going to say, no, that's not going to work. And I think that's really important in the things that, and recognizing that those folks that are managing that team, that are managing the insurance and the liability and all those kind of things, they have a really important role too. And they've got a lot of weight on them too. So anything that we can, pull, we can help lighten the load a little bit, or at least give some encouragement. I think it's going to be really, really important. All right. So Amanda, you want to go ahead, Bill?
I'm going to mess up your timeline too. One of the things that I think is really important, we've been really blessed to have an inclusion specialist that kind of leads our team. But more than ever this year, every single one of our staff, every single counselor, every lifeguard, everybody is their own inclusion specialist director. And they have to be able to, so we're really working in staff training to weave it into everything that we're doing. So that, normally when we could mix, we would be able to pull in that inclusion specialist, or be able to do different strategies. our young staff need to know how to navigate those challenges or those opportunities that they might have and be able to react within their group. So we are all inclusion specialists. It's not just the leadership. It's our boots on the ground counselors that are doing that.
That was actually a point that I wanted to touch on before we move to the next question, and you just articulated it so beautifully in that what it is that we're seeing and hearing as a field and with partner programs is focusing on what do we do well, what do we believe in? We believe in camp, we believe in kids, and we believe in inclusion, and those are the things that we do well. And we have to use that as the center of the focus for what we can do when we do reopen, thinking about the fact that now everyone is even more committed within their small groups to believe in and do all of those things well, right? As Bill just said, rather than thinking about how it is that you can address this as a group, take that model of what you would do as a camp overall and apply it to your small groups. How often do we say, oh, if only I had really small groups of kids to work with, I could do beautiful things with inclusion. Well, here you go, right? We can think about what are the things that we normally do for our children who aren't comfortable with touch, who don't like close interaction. Well, now here you go. You can do it universally for everyone. What are the things we normally do to use visuals and present directions in different ways and bring everyone together through different ways of communication? Well, now here you go. Here's your chance to apply different models of communication and interaction within your small groups and touch on all of those things that you believe in as an organization that you would do to meet the kids with diverse needs, and now simply make it the way you address how it is that you're going to meet the needs of kids universally in your program. I think there's some really exciting opportunities to take inclusion and make it simply a part of the fabric of every activity that you do within every group. Cool, so that actually is a great segue for us to move on to our next question, where it's some of the practical strategies, some of the again, sort of boots on the ground tips and tools for here's something that we've tried that has already worked, or something that we've heard programs are implementing that we think is a great idea, or something that we would recommend based on great best practices and evidence that we know has a good potential for being really positive this summer. So let's start with Bill, and then we'll move to Lisa and Aron. You can follow up and close us out on that question.
Again, Lisa mentioned this earlier. Visual schedules are really, really important. And one of the nice things about, because we're doing everything in groups, the schedule actually gets a little easier. And because we kind of schedule the trail groups moving around, and the schedule stays relatively the same throughout the weeks of day camp. Kids might move up or down into a trail group based on their age and the age of the other campers that are in. But that consistency of the schedule is really nice, and that we can pre-print all of our things, put it on a 3-ring binder, and it's pretty easy to show that visual schedule that has both pictures and words, because we know that campers have different filters in getting information, and also talking through it auditorily. So that's a really important piece. The other thing is, we still have our inclusion room, right? To be able to break out when we need to have when a camper just needs to have a cool down time or needs some different stimulation than they would when they might be getting. The challenge is we've had to modify that so that it can be sanitized. So we've had to think about what is in that room, what is in. We actually have little mobile packets too. So what are those? What are in those bags? So we've thought about sanitation as part of how are we doing that. And so is one of my favorite things is, and I don't actually know what they're called. They're like those kind of wet bubble beads where for sensory that you can put your hands in and they feel great. We can't sanitize those, right? And so we know that every kid wants to touch those. So we need to come up with something different for that stimulus when we need those to utilize those opportunities. You know, we tend to sing a lot at camp. Just because we can't do a giant campfire with everybody really close doesn't mean that we can't be singing, right? It doesn't mean that we can't have, well, it's more joyful noise with me than actual singing. But we want to make sure that we are still doing all of those things. We're just separated. So maybe we just need to be louder, right? And we know that some kids have, when we are being louder, it brings up other issues of sound sensitivity, right? So maybe there needs to be, we need to be able to explain that to our parents, that so if normally in our setting they wouldn't need to have earmuffs on, maybe they need to bring those just in case. Right? We know that having the touch is something that can be tough, and you know, especially around the face with face masks. So you know, are there different options? Is there a face shield that can be used that is clear, so that we can see facial expressions? You know, we just have to think differently about getting to the same finish line. And so I'm going to pass it over to Lisa, but I would love to get some specific questions in the chat that I can kind of, when we go to the Q&A, I'd be happy to talk through some of those specific things with program.
And Bill, we've been getting some of those in chat and then to me via email, so I'll be able to post some. Have you thought about blank kinds of questions that we can use as well? Lisa, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, great, fantastic, thanks. And that's a great segue, Bill. So a few of the strategies or things to be thinking about when you're, you know, designing or thinking about games and participation, not just inclusively, but also within the new guidelines. So reviewing expectations, and Bill had gone over the schedule, how important that is. And I'm going to reiterate how important, even if you need to break down expectations to a particular game, right? So you're sitting down with your small group and saying, we're going to try a new tic-tac-toe game, but it's a live version out on the field, and going over what the expectations are, how you participate, what is it, you know, first we do it individually, then we do it as a group, and then we, you know, get back in the circle and see how we did. Whatever the activity is, make sure you're going over expectations about that. Like say you were doing a relay, and usually you do a relay and you touch each other's hands. Now you talk about what are some other options we can come up with rather than touching each other's hands. Maybe there could be like a call that you could do, or an animal sound, something like that, right? So really sitting down before any activity and, you know, showing visually on a schedule, right? You know, so kind of going over your little visual schedule, but then make sure you have an expectation list, and it's the icons and words of what do we expect in this, or what can we, you know, understand about this next activity. So that would be my number one thing to be thinking about. I'd also, you know, say that making sure you get to know your your campers, right? Their strengths, their gifts, their joys. What do they bring to the world? So often what we do find is that, you know, we're so focused on the issues that they have, or the troubles they have, or, you know, this child does this, this, and that. No, let's try to be focused on the positives. What is somebody very, passionate about? Make sure we have that in the back of our mind, so that that's how we can start making connections and helping with social connectedness. So we want to make sure we, hashtag keep the social. We've been saying social distancing. I want to throw away that word and say physically distancing, but keep social engagement. How can we make sure that kiddos are engaged? So if, Sarah likes SpongeBob SquarePants, hey, did you know that Molly likes SpongeBob SquarePants, right? So making those connections that way, or trying to help kids to still be socially connected while staying physically distant. So that's something I was thinking about as well. And just a little bit more practical, I started looking up some, ideas suggested, talk to some other colleagues and friends about what suggestions. And I thought this one was great. Every camper brings a beach towel with them. That beach towel is going to be generally around, 5 feet long, right? So anytime you can have a visual as to what 6 feet looks like, the better. So a towel, even maybe when you're going in a line from, line up, we're all going to the pool, maybe there's noodles that are about that distance, and those are the spacers that are used between one camper and another. Just ideas like that. I actually came up with, I started looking into, when Amanda sent these questions, different websites, resources, video links, and some ideas that I came up with. I'd love to. I put them all on one document. I'll throw them into the chat box so that you guys can have some ideas, and please add to them. If that's okay with everybody, I'd love to do that. One other idea I came up with, it was called, kind of getting used to the masks, and if camps are going to be requiring masks at all time, just games around maybe guess my face or guess my feeling, right? So we can start focusing on identifying when somebody's like this, their eyebrows, are they happy, are they angry, are they, whatnot. So you still have that, a little bit of a game that you can play with the masks on. Just another idea. All right, I think that's everything. You brought it up, Bernicia, just kind of triggered an idea. Make sure that kiddos that do have sensory issues, speak to families ahead of time and see if they can come with their own little sensory kit, right? What are the items that they like? If they have that need to be touching something, squeezing something, or have, that they have their own private little kit that they can access, and just have the guidelines on how to access that, throughout the day when they need it. So any questions on any of that, I'd say, certainly I welcome you to reach out. But I'm going to throw that document on so that you have some ideas that I came up with. And that's it.
Awesome. I think, I'm seeing a couple of the questions chat. I know, Amanda, you have a couple too. And just from a practical standpoint, I know we are thinking 6 feet apart at all times, 6 feet apart at all times. But, what I've, read and gone through some webinars and things about guidelines, we aren't completely prevented from touching another child or doing these. We just have to take, appropriate precautions with masks and gloves and other things. I know when the first wave, when CDC actually came out with their guidelines and the ACA task force, I know one of the questions was about putting, sunscreen on children. Like, that is something that outdoor camps have to do and have to be a part of. And of course, again, you have to follow what your state says. But, they were talking about the fact that, if you need to do that, you put on gloves, you put on a mask, and you put on sunscreen, and then you remove the gloves and you move back and you distance. And so I know, talking about effectively interacting with a child without touching them, I know that there are children who don't want touch, and yay, that's great, that's wonderful. We're in, like Amanda said, we're in a great time for that. But there are children who require maybe hand over hand, or things like that are allow. And the biggest thing that's going to have to happen there is the difference now between a gloved hand versus what you used to do. Those kind of things that you're going to have to, you're going to have to navigate a little bit. And, one of the practical tips, we've talked with some programs about that they are exploring is that if some of the accommodations that you're providing seem to make a child fearful or uncomfortable, perhaps what you do is you ramp up into participation, meaning that it's not a drop off for the whole day. And again, I know this is not necessarily practical in every scenario, but drop off for the whole day and hope it works out. It's, hey, we're going to do this for 30 minutes today, or we're going to do this for an hour today. And then we're going to phase back in and we're going to ramp into getting used to some of these new accommodations that may need to be made, or the same accommodation in a different way that may cause some discomfort or fear. So those are some other things you can consider. We did a whole workshop on with some folks on doing, picture stories. I know we've talked about picture schedules, but we also talked about picture stories, more commonly known as social stories. But again, we have to kind of navigate around the use of that term because it's still trademarked. And so picture preparation stories, or whatever you want to call them. But basically stories about how things are going to go. What's drop off going to look like? What is this activity going to look like? And, you need to, utilize these stories in your programs, but also send them home as a resource prior to children coming, so that they can have a story about what's going to happen. And this is something that can be prevented. And here's what I will tell you. Sometimes I think these get written off as maybe for younger children, for children with disabilities, for whatever. This is a time where these types of stories are going to be appropriate for all ages, for all ability levels, for all whatever. Because again, if your program is going to look different than what they're used to, this is a great way to express it. And like Lisa said, express it in a positive way, not in a, oh, woe is me, we've got to change camp, we're not really having camp this year because it doesn't look exactly the way camp has looked every other year, so forth and so on. It's very much part of just, hey, we're evolving, we're moving, we're growing, and these are some of the changes we're going to make. And stuff. So that's something that, from a practical standpoint, I think can be really important. And again, going back to the families and that communication piece, just early, often, and as much as you possibly can. I listened early on in this whole process to a podcast about leading through crisis. And one of the things they talked about was your communication should go up. And even if the communication is no different than the day before, at least you don't leave a gap. And gaps in communication lead to assumptions. And one of my new favorite phrases is the word assumicide. And we don't want anyone to commit a suicide through the assumptions, because there's gaps in communication. So.
Lisa, I noticed that you unmuted. Do you want to jump in and say something?
Oh, I was just on mute from before, but I was going to echo. Hopefully I wasn't noisy.
No, not at all. Just to follow up on what Aron had just shared, and then to lead us into some of the specific questions that folks have been posting in the chat, or we've been getting electronically, is again, remember what it is that you know and can discover through communication and connection with your campers about what it is that their needs are, because many of their individual needs may actually be general needs that you can meet for your whole camp group. And so we've been getting questions about, well, what about kids who communicate through visual expression and facial expressions and need that visual interaction, particularly seeing each other's face, or how it is they express concern, etc. Well, that's something that all kids benefit from, right? So even using things like having sort of cue cards with facial expressions on them, or even fat heads, where it is that you show or they can show, this is what it is that I'm doing to show that I'm upset. Coming up with a communication system as a group for what your happy cue is, what your sad cue is, what your cue or your signal for I need help is, or more importantly, I need a break if a child needs a break. Having an opportunity for everyone to sort of peek at each other, show me your smile, and what it is that looks like, even though you'll be wearing a mask and they'll be wearing a mask for most of the time. Understanding that in these trail groups or pods or households or whatever it is that the small groups are, if a child has more significant needs where it is that you provide one-on-one or two-on-one support to that child, those adults and that child are still included in that household group. They simply are now part of those numbers. So even though frequent touching less than 6 feet apart between campers can't happen, touching and interaction between that staff and that camper can still happen as long as they're the ones who are physically touching and interacting together. That doesn't mean that there isn't social connection beyond just that physical interaction. I hope that makes sense. Lisa, go ahead and feel free to address some of those, and then we have some for Bill as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm going to echo what Aron was saying about being okay with making modifications to the day, accommodations that basically my response to, and I know I hate to be so vague in my responses, but as many of the inclusion strategies that we can be using more preventatively to try to avoid these situations. The great communication is key. That's what ideally we want to be doing. And then I think that if, when you run into a situation where there's a child with some, significant behaviors and you're trying to assist in the moment, of course, whatever safety things that is your protocol at your particular program, wear gloves, masks, whatnot. But I'm a big fan of, everybody walks around with a piece of paper and a pen or some kind of communication device on them so that you're able to communicate to a child who is, having a meltdown. But use the strategies of it's too complex to go into right now, but really trying to use the strategies that help a child to come out of that meltdown. And a lot of it has to do with just giving the way you communicate, the verbal cues you give, maybe write down like first put on your shoes, then get your backpack, right? So whatever it is that you're looking to help get a child back and re-engaged into the group, you can do that without touching. And most of our interactions, I'm assuming with campers who are having a difficult time or whatnot, unless it's, of course, life-threatening, are done just with verbal direction and whatnot. But I would also, work with the family. And if you do have a situation, what are they doing at home when their child is having this type of reaction or behavior? But I really love Aron's idea about, and I say this a lot, that modifying how a person participates, how a camper participates. That could mean shorter days or, shorter segments where they're with a particular group, or that they come with, a family member with a one-to-one companion, anything like that, where it's already prearranged with the family. So we just got to get creative in how we're going to address that. And each one, unfortunately, is just so individual. What's going to work for this camper, we might have to try a couple different strategies for that camper or whatnot. So hopefully that's helpful.
I've seen a bunch of questions about how do you get, how do you actually touch, right? So I'll preface this that you have to follow your guidelines for your state and your health department. But here in Michigan, the circle of trust, the family group is expanded, right? My 7-year-old, we saw his friend in the neighborhood and they were like together like that in a second. We know that children can't necessarily always social distance. So we're trying to mitigate the risk. And so if you have a camper who has more than a group need that maybe needs a one-on-one need, have a conversation with that family, and so that they understand that inclusion specialist that's going to be with them is now part of their circle of trust, just like mom and dad might be. And so, you know, we are going around in trail groups as much as those trail groups are, yes, there is some social distancing, but they're not wearing, at least here in Michigan and our program, they're not wearing masks. Now, I will say when someone comes in, for particular me, I'm not a part of any of those trail groups. When I go and talk to a camper, I'm wearing a mask, right? So, so again, it's about making that staff, empowering that staff member who is part of the family, part of the cohort of the trail group, empowering them to have the knowledge and the power to be able to react to those things. I'm in support of that group. So so there are times where there is going to be touch and exposure, and if you know that they need facial cues, you have to take your mask off. I'm teaching a lifeguard class next week, and we aren't going to social distance, but only though everybody's going to be paired up, and they're only going to not social distance with their partner that they have to rescue, right? I actually used some of the stuff that I've learned through the inclusion project for my lifeguard class, right? Because I've got to figure out how to make a rescue but still stay separate. So I hope that helps alleviate some stress that sometimes there is not going to be that physical distancing, but you need to work within your guidelines of your state and your health department.
Aron, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's great.
Yeah. Again, just a reminder that you know, as a camp staff and as camp leadership, think about how it is that you can prepare the children for the environment and prepare the environment for the children. It's all teachable and learnable moments, right? And how it is that you're going to essentially implement multiple little camps within your big camp overall. And those little camps are interactive and inclusive and engaged, even though it may seem different when you convene as whole groups. What it is that happens in those little groups is still very much the spirit of what you do in your program and what you do in your camp. A couple of other questions that I see coming through, again, touch on those questions about how are you handling kids who need more intensive support, such as one-on-ones or someone with them the whole time. Bill, I'm going to go ahead and ask you, is your camp providing more intensive support to campers this summer? And does it go any further beyond what it is that you've already described as that inclusion specialist as part of that trail group, as part of that family?
Yeah, so the expectations, you know, we are so our normal ratio is a 1-to-10 ratio. When we need to, we work to have that 1-to-6, and we bring in our inclusion specialist. So we typically don't do one-on-one. If a camper does need one-on-one, we do every once in a while. If we're the best fit program for them, they can bring their own parapro in. So again, part of their family, and they just become part of the group. So it's just another, so if say we had an inclusion camper that was that needed one-on-one support, that was part of a group, and that normal group is 9 campers and 1 staff, and they brought a one-on-one, then that group goes down to 7 or 8, and that their person is just part of the group and is an extra person. So again, it's working with ratios and staff. So we are staying within our normal ratio operations that we advertise and normally have.
Awesome, thank you. Lisa or Aron, is there anything you want to add to that question specifically about more intensive support? Okay. Lisa, are you ready?
Yeah, no, I was just going to just reiterate how important it is to, be flexible and work with your families. I think that's where, be creative too on how that support can come. I love your model, Bill. I think that's like a really appropriate model of, trying to get this all done and trying to have that holistic kind of the organizational commitment. It sounds like you have that right built into your whole system. So well done.
And I'll just add, I know we have heard from some programs that do serve more personal needs when it comes to bathrooms and things like that, and there are programs that, because of everything that's going on and because of their guidelines, are not able to do that this year. So and that of course is unfortunate, but we can't we can't get our entire program shut down because we're trying to be mavericks in this area. So you do have to be aware that there may be some more intensive needs that under the guidelines that you're working under may be hard to do for this particular year. I think that's where you end up doing some things to go, okay, so how do we figure out other options? What are other places? What are other things we can do? What other program offerings we can offer to make sure that people can be a part of our program and get served like we want to serve them.
I will say that again, that communication is really key. So in one of our respite programs that we run during the school year, we had a camper that needed a little more intensive care. He loved our program so much, and within the conversation of the parents, that we were able to set up that they could not provide someone one-on-one to come to them for that whole weekend. But this individual needed this so badly and loved us so much that they worked it out that there were about 5 different people that would come in based on their schedule. And we said, great, come on, sign a release form. We're not going to charge you. You can eat with us. Come on, let's figure it out. And so it worked for Jean. And so we made it work. And so, again, just having that communication and being honest about your limitations allows the families to hey, can we do this? Can we do this? And working with them to brainstorm a way for them to get the program, the Manitou-Lin experience that they love.
I think that's actually a really important point for us to close on, is that, again, we want to provide the very best experience for our campers and families as possible. And that is a universal ideal that has nothing to do with the current COVID crisis. And there are ways through lots of collaboration and communication within your program and your staff to establish how it is that you can do that. And then a collaboration and partnership with your families to establish how it is that you can do that and all work together to make that happen. That truth hasn't changed, right? Okay. I see lots of great info coming in on the chat with some additional questions as well as links to resources. We will be putting together an FAQ document with all of this info to post with this video, as well as some supplementary materials on our website. If you haven't yet been to our website, it is www.inclusionproject.org. And there is a link on there to all of the NIP's resources, as well as a COVID-19 resource page for inclusion in in-person settings this summer, as well as virtual settings this summer. Aron, do you want to close us out, let people know what is upcoming, and say thanks to our panelists and presenters today?
Yeah, for sure. Bill and Lisa, thanks again. Thanks for always being willing to contribute to the larger mission of inclusion. And again, one of the things we've been very encouraged by over this time period is just the fact that in a time where we could be putting out our own fires and getting very insular. What we've seen in this community is even more than we've seen before, and that is the ability to reach out and the willingness to reach out and contribute to helping us all figure this out. And we're big believers in not reinventing the wheel. And I think it's really cool when I hear somebody like Lisa go, I saw a question and I Googled it, because what I know in that case is that I have the same access to Google that Lisa does. And so that means I don't have to have some expert level of expertise in order to make this all work. I can figure things out and I can go, but certainly willing, thank you for being willing to share. Thank you for all of what you're doing. Thank every one of you for serving kids the way you serve kids, the way you serve families, and we're super appreciative of what you're doing. We are here for you, like I said, and we are big fans of what you're doing. So please let us know how we can support. Please do not hesitate to ask questions. Amanda and I both, if you go to that COVID page and even our resource page, Amanda and I are both available for office hours. We have a Calendly link you can click on and schedule us to have a little more one-on-one conversation and time. And again, we're not saying that we know, but we'll figure it out and we'll point you in the right direction if we don't know, and we'll make this work together. So thank everybody for participating today. We'll have this information up. It'll probably be beginning of next week, so don't send a bunch of emails tomorrow going, "Where's the link?" We're going to work it all out, put it out in a package, and get it out to you. But this will be available, and you'll be able to see the answers to questions. And if you've got more questions, let us know, and we'll answer those too, and get that out as a resource. So with that, I think we're finished. Thank you very much.